a button, which means we've got to wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plain of the internet before we can go ahead and get started. It's a beautiful Monday. It's been sunny and bright all day, and we're digging into COVID as usual. We always love doing that. And it looks like the tubes are working, which is great news. So that means we can go ahead and get started. So let's do it, shall we? Wait. Now we can. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney broadcasting from deep in downtown Phoenix in the Valley of the Sun. And today we are talking about the consensus. That's right. We are digging into the COVID conundrum, questions about the origin of the pandemic. And of course, we are here on YouTube. We are live streaming. And so we're always walking around a minefield, just tip-tapping around out here, just trying to thread the needle on this one. But I think we can do it because I reread the rules. And as long as we're just talking about the origin, we should be okay. And so as always, a little disclaimer, be sure to follow the CDC guidelines. They care about you. They're trustworthy and they're a federal government agency. And they're doing a great job over there, so trust whatever they have to say. That being said, let's dig into it. So we've got a lot of stuff to attend to. As you can see, we've got several different segments that we're going to dig into. The first, of course, is the story that came out on Sunday. This was a Wall Street Journal exclusive telling us that a lab leak theory is the most likely origin of COVID-19 pandemic. The Energy Department now says, and you go, whoa. Now, we've talked a lot about COVID here. We sort of let off the brakes on it a little bit after we got, I think 2 different COVID strikes. I think our first warning was a COVID warning, and then we got an actual COVID strike that took us out of the game for a week, maybe another one. I don't know. We've dodged a lot of bullets here, but we always have been interested in how did it start? And it turns out maybe our government knows more than they're letting on. So we are going to get into it. We've got some old clips that I dug up just to make sure we can really get to the meat and potatoes of this. The question is about the questions about the origin of COVID. But we also have questions about the origin of these losers who said that those of us who questioned the official narrative, where did the origin of conspiracy theorists come from? Where did the origin of I am the science, trust me, I'm the science come from? Where did all this come from? Well, it's coming back from this letter from the Lancet. And I've got clips from Fauci when he was standing there next to Trump talking about the origin, where this thing came from. And we've got clips from Fauci. He's joking around about it. And so we're going to go through the history lesson a little bit before we actually read the story. It's a great story. And in fact, the Department of Energy is getting a letter from our friend James Comer, who's over at the Oversight Committee. And he sent a letter over to Jennifer Granholm, who's over there. So we'll take a look at that because he's saying, oh, so apparently you know something. The Wall Street Journal knows you know something. And now we want to know what you know, Jenny. So we'll see what that looks like. Then we're going to turn our attention back to memory lane. We've got several clips from Fauci on this. And you remember when Psaki and Doocey and Collins and Fauci were all hitting the media? These clips are kind of amazing to watch because if you look back on it, if you sort of look hindsight, you can just tell these people are just the worst. And so we've got Doocey versus Psaki. We've got a Francis Collins clip. Oh, all this origin stuff is just a giant distraction. Fauci saying that China destroyed the evidence, of course, very conveniently, all his evidence that probably implicated him. We've got that old, this was not that old, actually. This is from last year. But this great exchange between Rand Paul and Fauci. We're going to go through all of that, including questions about prosecutions. And one of the questions that has come up here is, how do we avoid this from ever happening again to make sure that nobody onboards America into another pandemic so quickly like they did last time? How do we avoid that again? Well, one of those ideas might be prosecutions, and Ted Cruz brought that up some time ago. So we'll talk about all of that. Then the White House reacting to the story, of course. We've got a bunch of clips from John Kirby. Actually, some interesting ones because this implicates a lot of things. We were all very concerned about the Chinese spy balloon, or maybe it wasn't a spy balloon, or it was little Timmy's weather balloon, from the hobby class out in, middle America. But turns out the actual spy balloon is allowed to fly over the country. The non-spy balloons are shot down with $400,000 Sidewinder missiles. But that was just a spy balloon. What if there is a big problem with China and the origin of COVID? I mean, what if they lied to us about the entire pandemic? What happens if we finally open up the door, the closet where they've been shoving all their virus particles over the last several years. And we say, oh, that's very convenient. What's in there? And it turns this relationship a little bit sour. I mean, you talk about spy balloons. What happens if they've got COVID balloons over there, tucked away under a mattress somewhere? Questions came to John Kirby. We'll see how he responds. We also have Karine Jean-Pierre, who answered several questions about this, including, is your administration ever going to talk about this? Okay, like we have questions about it. You've got some findings. Are you ever going to communicate that to the rest of us, the American people? So we've got some Karine to get into. And of course, my friends, you can see we've got a lot to get to. And if you would like to be a part of the broadcast, we are chatting away on all the different platforms. We're on Rumble, we're on Twitter, of course, we're on YouTube, but we're also on Locals. And we do member-only content here. So if you are a member, supporter, whether you're on YouTube or on Locals, you can join, become a member, and you'll get access to our private Telegram group, which is a lot of fun. We're also live streaming there to our private Telegram group. And so you can get the link if you're a YouTube member or a Locals member. You get also, some extra content and community, which is what it's all about. And so thanks for supporting the work that we do here and joining and connecting with other watchers. Also, want to shout out our sponsors, our friends over at Brickhouse Nutrition, the Field of Greens. I've got mine. It's your daily servings of fruits and vegetables in a convenient, delicious tasting supplement that goes down easy, gives you your daily needs, and it makes the vegetables happy. They want to be eaten. That's their whole purpose. That's why they're so dang nutritious. So get yours at fieldofgreens.com. And don't forget to use code Robert to save that 15% off. Eat your veggies. All right. Also, my former law firm, I am no longer at the R&R Law Group. However, they still are the R&R Law Group, even better than ever. And they're helping good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but hopefully beyond that in their lives. You can find their help 480-787-0394 online at rrlawaz.com. All right, so let's get right into it today. The lab leak theory. Is it confirmed? Well, if you believe a classified report apparently leaked from the Department of Energy over to the Wall Street Journal, you might think the answer is yes. We're going to go through that story because it broke over the weekend and there were some interesting details inside of it. They say with low, authority, with low plausibility, with low confidence. But it's kind of the best of a bunch of other bad options, according to the article. And so we are going to go through that in detail, but I want to make sure we have our bearings straight before we do, because you remember this. I mean, this wasn't that long ago. Feels like ages ago, but we lived through COVID. We went through it in depth on this channel. In fact, in many ways, watching the Watchers was born in response to COVID. We had, I had to sort of decide what to do with my life in the wake of them shutting everything down at our law firm. And so it was a big, big pivot. And so we sat through all of this and listened to these people tell us day after day, this is the science. This is the truth. You can believe us. Don't think about these other things. All of you people like you and me who were sitting here saying, well, maybe that doesn't make sense, or maybe this doesn't make sense, or I've got questions about this, that, or the other thing. They called us conspiracy theorists. They called us lunatics, dangerous. And they said we needed to be suppressed, struck, removed off the internet. And I remember this just like yesterday. Here was one clip. You may have flashbacks to these briefings. But you remember when Fauci was standing next to Donald Trump and giving us these lectures on the daily.
Dr. Fauci, could you address these suggestions or concerns that this virus was somehow man-made, possibly came out of a laboratory in China? You studied this virus. What are the prospects of that?
Yeah. There was a study recently that we can make available to you where a group of highly qualified evolutionary virologists looked at the sequences there and the sequences in bats as they evolve. And the mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal.
Man, he's so smart.
So, I mean, the paper will be available. I don't have the authors right now, but we can make that available to you.
Yeah, the paper will be available. Can't really explain much about it, but did the Chinese have anything to do with this? No. Fauci, did you have anything to do with this? Did you fund any special research through any different, sort of shell companies, or maybe not shell companies, actual third-party companies like EcoHealth Alliance? Did the NIAID give money to this third-party group who then funded the Chinese, who then investigated and created their own viral compounds? Maybe that's what happened. No. Wet market, wet lab. It all just came out very consistent with the sequence, and nobody knew any better, man. This was like back when it all just started happening. He could have come out and said, well, we don't know, actually. But that wasn't what that sounded like. He was pretty consistent there. He knew what he was up to. He knew what they had been involved in. And he stood there when all this stuff was breaking and everybody's social distancing, not just every other chair. Look at this, every 3 chairs. Holy moly. Times were really rough back then.
We can make available to you where a group of highly qualified evolutionary virologists looked at the sequences there and the sequences in bats as they evolve, and the mutations that it took to get
very
to
consistent.
the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal to a human.
Yeah, had we known that his little agency was maybe colluding with other third-party agencies to work with Wuhan, that would have been a different, line of questionings coming his way. But that's exactly what he said. And you'll also notice in that little speech that he gave, something he was very good at. No, definitely not. No, very consistent. He said a lot of really smart people dug into this, man. A lot of smart epidemiologists and virologists and people who went to Oxford and Harvard and all these places. They wrote a definitive paper on this, and I'll refer you to them. And you heard him in that clip. I don't have it at hand here, but they're smarter than me, and I'll get you the source at some other point in time. And you remember how this works now? On this channel, it's so frustrating, but we have seen the same pattern over and over and over again. We haven't seen it with, in the medical space like this, but we've seen it where certain law firms like Perkins Coie will hire people like Michael Sussman to hire people, third-party providers back then, like Fusion GPS, to create their own fake document called the Steele dossier. Then that works its way back up the chain, gets shoveled back down the gullet of the FBI. The FBI says, oh, this is Russia collusion, right? They open an investigation or start to, and then they play off that open investigation, take it to the media. Jake Sullivan then is playing both sides, right? Plays the FBI against the media. FBI's investigating this. You better run with this story. Goes to the media, goes to the FBI, says, the media is going to break this story. You better investigate it. Same thing here. Okay, so Fauci needed something as a pretext. He needed an origin source. He needed ground zero, patient zero, magazine zero, to go out there and start to poison the well and sort of craft the narrative that best served him, best served his clients, and best covered up all of his gain of function funding and research. And so where did that article come from, and what did that article look like? You remember it. We've talked about it here. This is the Lancet paper. The statement in support of the scientists and public health professionals and medical professionals of China combating COVID. That was the source article. And if you notice, when this came out, it was published February 19, 2020. Okay, that was before the national emergency was even declared. So this was like at the very beginning. Man, we didn't even know what the heck was going on. We thought the death rate was like 10% and like 2%, and then nobody had any idea. And so, boom, they got the foundation laid, didn't they? They got that puppy right out there, February 19, 2020. And here's what that paper said. Very short statement. This is the origin story for where it all came from. And look who signed off on this thing. They write Charles Kalischer, Carol, the couple names that really stand out. Peter Daszak, you remember him. He's the person who was running or involved with EcoHealth Alliance at the time. And EcoHealth Alliance, as we know, had actual deals with Wuhan. And Ron Paul is going to get into that for us a little bit later on. So we have all of these statements, Christian, Drosden, and others. They all signed this statement. Look at all these very smart people. Now, you and I wouldn't know these people, presumably from anybody else, but these are all, writing in the Lancet, which is like the most prestigious type of periodical for this coverage. And all these names are on there. Now they write, "We speak in one voice. To add your support for this statement, sign our letter online." And they write here, they say, "We declare no competing interests." You see this? We declare no competing interests. Well, there might be a competing interest there if Peter Daszak, who was running EcoHealth Alliance, if he got money from the federal government to fund gain-of-function research in China and then cause COVID, and then writes a letter that says, don't investigate the cause of COVID, which might have been my company, which was meddling around in Wuhan. You see how that might be a conflict of interest there? Yeah, pretty big one. And if you go through the rest of these people, you start finding some interesting connections, as many people have done. They're all getting grants, they're all getting money, they're all getting paid big bucks for it. So very conveniently, right? Look, this is all authority. Right? Look at all these sources here, all these footnotes. So everybody, all the journos in the media, as soon as this got forwarded to their inbox, they go, "Oh, holy moly. Look at all these numbers and journals and stuff like that." And I'm like, we can't even copy and paste this into our article. So it must be very intelligent. But they round everybody up. Remember, this is in mid-February, almost to the day, right? Almost 3 years ago to the day. Says a statement in support of the scientists, the public health professionals, and the others combating COVID-19. They write very solemnly, they say, "We are public health scientists who have closely followed the emergence of the novel coronavirus disease, and we are deeply concerned about its impact on global health and well-being." All right, even though these people were meddling around in this industry and funding all of this garbage in China, at least Daszak was. "We have watched as the scientists and public health professionals and medical professionals of China have worked diligently and effectively to rapidly identify the pathogen behind this outbreak and put significant measures to reduce its impact and share their results." Look at this, laugh, get the laugh button out, "transparently with the global health community. This effort has been remarkable," they said. The people who probably caused it are, I'm sure a lot of people were working very hard. I don't doubt that. A lot of other people who were, on authors to this letter were doing a lot of great work to save lives over the last several years. These people notwithstanding. Here it says, "We sign this statement in solidarity with all scientists and health professionals in China who continue to save lives during this outbreak. We're all in this together with our Chinese counterparts against this new viral threat." It's great. They say the rapid, open, and transparent sharing of data on this outbreak is now being threatened by rumors and misinformation about its origins. "We stand together to strongly condemn conspiracy theories suggesting that COVID-19 does not have a natural origin." You see that? So this was the original statement. This is misinformation zero. Conspiracy theories now became acceptable vernacular to use because a bunch of journos got a copy of this and they said, "Oh my gosh, look at all these universities here. Queensland? Holy moly. That's in Australia. That's way smarter than me." The EcoHealth Alliance is also on here. Boston University is on here, right? You got Massachusetts Medical School, all of the people. So if all these people think it's a conspiracy theory, then you have to also say it's a conspiracy theory unless you want to be a part of the conspiracy theory. So they say scientists from multiple countries have published and analyzed the genomes of the causative agent, and they overwhelmingly conclude, idiot scientists, idiots, right? Idiots. They overwhelmingly conclude that this coronavirus originated in wildlife, as have so many other emerging pathogens. So I don't think, so they're out of consensus now, right? I mean, I think the consensus is it's a lot more open of a question now. So their overwhelming conclusion, these idiots might have also drafted the letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian misinformation. Okay, it's the same thing. It's the same analogy. You get a bunch of the intelligence idiots, ex-CIA, whatever. Or maybe they're not that dumb, okay? Like maybe I'm just being a little bit too dismissive of them. Maybe they're all very intelligent and they just say, oh, I know what we'll do. Let's just write one of those letters again. Remember when we did that back at Jim's house back in 2012? Oh, yeah, let's do that again. And they all get together, they have a cocktail, they draft a letter because they know they can shove it down all of our gullets and the media will just run wild with it because they're not going to contest all of these people. They went to more schools than they did, man. So they concoct it and they shove it down the media just like they did with the Hunter Biden laptop letter. Media buys it up. Same thing happens here. They say this is further supported by a letter. Oh, wow. From the presidents of U.S. National Academies of Science and Medicine and by scientific communities they represent, probably a bunch of other people also on the payroll. Conspiracy theories used a second time. They do not and do nothing but create fear, rumors, and prejudice and jeopardize our global collaboration in a fight against this virus. And was China being open and transparent at all about any of this? Okay, so they're also being dishonest, like this sharing of data provision here. What are you talking about? What are you, nuts? China hasn't been sharing anything. In fact, it's one of the biggest critiques even to this day. You're going to hear it even from Biden's people. They say, well, it'd be kind of nice if they gave us more. There isn't no sharing of data. So why are you trying to cover for them if there is no real benefit? Well, I can tell you why. It's because there's a conflict of interest here, and they wanted to get this out early. Get out in front of it. You pre-swayed, pre-butt any of the inquiries. And it worked. It worked big time. So maybe these people are geniuses. Now, we support the call from the director of the World Health Organization to promote scientific evidence and unity. So pretty. Over misinformation and conjecture. We want you, the science and health professionals of China, to know that we stand with you in your fight against this virus. Now, we invite others to join us in supporting the scientists, public health professionals, and medical professionals of Wuhan and across China. Stand with our colleagues on the front line. All right. Now, there you go. So all of this was the origin story, right? One of the originals. And this was what Fauci and others passed along to everybody in the media, and they gobbled it up because that's basically what they do. They're extremely good at copy and pasting. They're not very good at articulating new lines of thought. And so what they do is they just took it and ran with it. And as we played in that clip, right, that was what Fauci was literally referring the press to. Don't believe me. Here's what these authorities say. Go believe them. And so he was even joking about this. People were saying that maybe he made this up. Maybe this was all just Fauci's work. And as we were going around, people are sitting watching Fauci. This one here is probably maybe after we had some mandates or in place or something. This is Fauci joking about concocting the virus in his kitchen.
Of the initial outbreak, WA1, Washington 1, is considered the ancestral model strain.
I developed the ancestral.
Hilarious. Hilarious.
I created it.
That's right. You let it loose.
I was in my kitchen.
You let it loose. Yeah. Right. Okay. Gain of function. Here we come. You were here making aranja, Italian meatballs, and that's a gain of function.
Hilarious. These two hucksters laughing it up. Yup, about one of the worst things that's ever happened on this planet. Created, in theory, by somebody in a lab in Wuhan. Maybe that person was funded by money from the federal government, which came through Fauci's agency into EcoHealth Alliance before it went over to Wuhan. Big giant joke, right? All a big game. And there's a lot of importance in understanding where this came from to make sure we don't have it happen again and to make sure the people responsible for it are held accountable. And the people who profited off of this catastrophe are also in the same boat if there was any malfeasance and collusion involved in the suppression of the information. So now with all of that background in place, let's take a look at the actual article. The Wall Street Journal reported that a lab leak is the most likely origin of the pandemic, according to the Energy Department. A new revised assessment was released based on new intelligence. You see here a photograph of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This was in Wuhan, China in 2020. Looks nice. Not that nice. Here, the article written by Michael Gordon and Warren Strobel details the following. They tell us that the U.S. Energy Department has concluded that the COVID pandemic most likely arose from a lab leak. You're kidding me. Wow. Now, the idea that this thing came from a natural origin went out the window in my mind. If you remember, and I don't remember the exact date, and I've shared this story with you before, but I remember there was sort of one narrative coming out of the Trump administration. It's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. We're going to get through this thing. And then one day, he sort of woke up in the morning and he was sort of his normal self. He had like a meeting or two. And then that afternoon, he was a different person. Okay. His face looked white, much different pigment. And his demeanor and his language, everything changed. And I don't know exactly when it was, but it was right around the time I think of the national emergency. Everything changed. And at that moment, it sort of hit me, okay, maybe we're dealing with something that is a little bit more serious than what it seems, or this is not something that is the same as the other things, because the other things were all natural. And we've heard all about them, right? We've heard all the bird flus and swine flus and every other flu that just sort of percolated naturally and then emerged. This was almost a military-like response. Our whole government almost became weaponized. The media became weaponized. Everything just moved in unison like a transformer to put us in our places as good, obedient citizens and to get us into conformity. Why was that? Felt like something different. So now they come out here. Oh, wow, hey, might be actually a lab leak. You're kidding. According to a classified intelligence report recently provided to the White House and to key members of Congress. And so recently meaning, not something old, presumably in the last days, weeks, months. Now, the shift by the Energy Department, and the reason why it's the Energy Department is also interesting. People are wondering, why are they looking into this? Which previously was undecided on how the virus emerged, is noted in an update to a 2021 document by the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. The new report highlights how different parts of the intelligence community have arrived at disparate judgments about the pandemic's origin. The Energy Department now joins the FBI in saying the virus likely spread via mishap at a Chinese lab. 4 other agencies, along with a national intelligence panel, still judge that it was likely the result of natural transmission, and 2 are undecided. So we've got 4 other agencies along with a national intelligence panel. So it sounds like it's 5-2. It's 5-2. Wow, that's our government at work, isn't it? 5 say it was probably natural. Okay. And you can judge the credibility of those agencies. And the other 2 say no, definitely or very likely a mishap at a Chinese lab. The other 2 are undecided. So that's our government in action. They can't even figure it out amongst themselves. Now, the Energy Department's conclusion, the fact that the FBI says it was a lab leak makes me think that it was probably the most natural thing ever, but I don't know. That's just me being oppositional to the FBI. Okay, just kidding. All right, the Energy Department's conclusion is the result of new intelligence and is significant because the agency has pretty considerable scientific expertise and it oversees a network of U.S. national laboratories. The Energy Department made its judgment, they say, quote, with low confidence, though, according to people who actually read the report. The FBI previously came to the conclusion the pandemic was likely the result of a lab leak with moderate confidence, and they still hold that view. The FBI's cadre of microbiologists, immunologists, and other scientists analyzed that and other threats. Now, U.S. officials declined to give details on the fresh intelligence. They added that while the Energy Department and the FBI each say an unintended lab leak is most likely, they came to that conclusion for different reasons. They're still assessing what happened. More than 1 million Americans have died. Yeah, insane. The National Intelligence Council, which conducts long-term analysis and 4 agencies, still assess low confidence of natural transmission. CIA and other agencies remain undecided between the lab leak theory. Now, this is, remember, there's a concept called strategic ambiguity. And we see this largely with the United States and Taiwan. Okay, so think about this in sort of a Cold War era, concept. This is a concept that actually is an interesting article from Wikipedia that we see here. A policy of deliberate ambiguity. So you're not actually trying to come to a conclusion, right? And this is sort of what this feels like. We have this story where we've got 5 agencies have it one way, in a way that's the most benign. Okay, 5 agencies say, no, it's not China, it's natural. That's good news for China. That's really good news for everybody who is at fault or could potentially be at fault for creating a pandemic, right? If it was an accident and a lab leak. All of those people are exonerated. It's like the best news for them if it was in fact natural. So we've got 5 who say natural, 2 who say accident or something else, and 2 are unknown. Very strategic ambiguity. If this turns into one thing, if this becomes, it absolutely was a lab leak, it's 9-0 that it was a lab leak, or 35, where all 21, 31 intelligence agencies, however many they are, come out and they say, got it. Well, then that means that there is going to be a demand for repercussions, right? There's going to be a demand for pursuing a remedy, and it's going to further deteriorate U.S.-China relationships, in theory, right? If you were looking at this as I'm not saying that we shouldn't get to the bottom of it in order to justify that. I'm just explaining that if there was an escalation here, and all 20 intelligence agencies said it absolutely is China, China's going to say it absolutely is not, it's you, or you paid for it or whatever, and things escalate. So it's almost like every side has a lot of benefit by just keeping it ambiguous. Now, here is a policy that sort of supports this. A policy of deliberate ambiguity or strategic ambiguity is whereby a government is intentionally ambiguous on certain aspects, and here they call it its foreign policy. But why would this also, not come domestic side? They're not going to tell us about this stuff because it has international implications. It has foreign policy implications. They say it may be useful if the country has contrary foreign and domestic policy goals or deterrent strategies. They say there is deliberate ambiguity regarding the government of the country of China and Taiwan. They claim, China claims mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, and others claim it as free. And so you have this situation where everybody's just kind of quiet. Here, the oldest and longest running of the United States' deliberate ambiguous policy was whether and how it would defend Taiwan. They say if Taiwan is attacked, the U.S. just says, we don't know what we're going to do. We might defend them, we might not. This is the cornerstone of U.S. relations. The policy was intended to discourage both a unilateral declaration of independence and an invasion by Taiwan. Because if you say we'll defend them, then China's going to invade. If you say, we're not, then Taiwan is going to have issues with that. So apparently, it's this ongoing thing. But I guess here's another one. Yeah. Another historic use of the policy is whether the United States would retaliate to biological attacks or nuclear weapon attacks. So you're just ambiguous. And so I guess my point of sharing that is that we don't know whether our U.S. government is ever going to tell us about any of this stuff. So they say, in other words, this might be intentional. So despite the agency's differing analyses, the update reaffirmed an existing consensus between them that COVID-19 wasn't the result of a Chinese biological weapons program. The people who've read the classified report says. It's like, whew, so they're all real happy about that because that doesn't mean that we escalate this into a global war. Or maybe it does, right? Maybe this is just the first step. Maybe the next step is, maybe the Chinese were behind this and the war drums get pounded even harder and harder and harder. And they start pointing the fingers and using that as another pretext to escalate tensions. Then China explodes and they say, to heck with you guys, we are invading Taiwan. Boom, we got a whole second front going in this global war. So a senior U.S. intelligence official confirmed that the intelligence community had conducted the update whose existence hasn't previously been reported. This official added that it was done in light of new intelligence. further study of academic literature and consultation with experts outside of the government, which is where actually all of the experts usually reside. The update, which is less than 5 pages, not long, wasn't requested by Congress, but lawmakers, particularly House and Senate Republicans, are pursuing their own investigations into this. Officials didn't say whether an unclassified report would be released or not. And there's more on the story there. FBI declined to comment. Energy Department declined to comment. They don't want to talk too much about it. But we have the Republicans who are in fact sending information or sending a letter and demands over to the Department of Energy saying, we want to know more about this. All right. I mean, you know, this leaked somehow. You sent it over to the White House. We want a copy of it now. So this letter came out from James Comer. You can see our friend down here at the bottom. Coming from James Comer, of course, you know him as chairman of the Oversight and Accountability Committee. Also, chairman of the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus, Brad Wenstrup, also submitting this letter over to the Department of Energy, the same entity that just apparently drafted that memo. This letter comes February 27th from Congress. They say, Dear Secretary Granholm, our coronavirus subcommittee is investigating the origins of the pandemic, and since April 2nd, Republicans have been investigating this, including China's role in obscuring the truth about the initial outbreak. We also want to know whether any U.S. taxpayer dollars funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology, their dangerous gain-of-function research. They say the Select Committee is now the only committee in Congress with explicit jurisdiction to conduct this inquiry. So they tell us. Now, this investigation, Jennifer, will be a priority for the Select Subcommittee, but also for the global community. We're all very interested in it. That's right. As stated by 18 experts, so-called, in Science magazine, they said that knowing how COVID emerged is critical for informing global strategies. Further, according to the Lancet, the same article who published that, in my opinion, misinformation at the outset, they would say it's just probably, premature, and they didn't have all the facts and all of that stuff. And science is, modular or evolving. Further, according to the Lancet, they say knowing about the origin would provide greater clarity into not only the causes of the pandemic, but also vulnerabilities into future outbreaks. The origins of the disease has taken the life of more than 6 million people. We still don't know where it came from. Uncovering the truth about the pandemic is vital to U.S. national security, critical to the prevention of future pandemics, and will bring some semblance of closure to the families who lost loved ones. Now, your department has been at the center of the origins debate. You oversee national laboratories. You interact directly with the intelligence community. Therefore, Ms. Granholm, your documents and testimony are essential to informing the Select Subcommittee about what the government knew and when the government knew it. So to assist Congress and our Select Subcommittee with its investigation, including not limited to the areas involving COVID and the CCP, we want all of this information no later than March 13th, 2023. And it looks like they want a lot of meat and potatoes here. Let's see what they're digging into. Congress wants, first, all documents and communications that came from the Department of Energy over to EcoHealth. Perfect. Gain of function stuff, biological weapons stuff, Wuhan Center for Disease Prevention stuff, all of it from October 2019 to today. Anything involved, that's a big meaty one right there. So same type of stuff involving EcoHealth, Wuhan Centers for Disease Prevention. Also everything from the Office of the Presidency, communications between the Department of Energy and Wuhan. So basically all the Wuhan entities. So you can see here, like the Wuhan version of CDC, the Wuhan version of Wildlife Preservation and EcoHealth Alliance. EcoHealth was sort of reformulated as the Wildlife Preservation or out of the Wildlife Preservation. They want all of the trusts for Jeremy Farrar, the Wellcome Trust, Dr. James Ledoux, Dr. Tom Inglesby. Man, they're going after names here. all documents between employees of the Department of Energy. This is like some serious stuff here. EcoHealth Alliance. They want names. So Scripps Research, Dr. Michael Farzan, Dr. Christian Anderson. He wrote another article, I think, that was very important at the outset of this that got picked up by a bunch of people in the media. Ian Lipkin, Edward Holmes, bunch of doctors. Columbia, University of Edinburgh, Sydney. All the emails, all the names. They want more from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. They want all communications, classified reports that came out about the origins. They want all documents from the National Intelligence, all documents, Office of the Presidency, all assessments from the Department of the DOE, right? All non-governmental experts, all peer-reviewed documents, all classified materials, and so on. They say the select subcommittee is authorized to investigate this. We will, including the gain-of-function research, all executive branch policies, and so on. Whew, that's a lot. Thank you very sincerely, your friend, James Comer. And you can just assemble that up nice for us and bring it over with the bow on it. And we'll be looking forward to what those answers involve, if there are any answers. And previously, we've seen a lot of stonewalling from a lot of these executive agencies. Only time will tell if they do, in fact, respond. But that is the story, the letter from Congress. And of course, there will be a lot more. But before we get into the White House and the White House's response, we got to take a look at some of the highlights, some of the trip down memory lane, because the White House is playing this game, okay? Kirby and Karine, they're all sort of trying to paper over a lot of the statements that we all remember like they're seared into our brain, because that was the only thing that they would allow us to watch when they kept us caged in our homes. So we have this situation here where you remember, science, they say, is evolving, and things change, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's a misinformation warfare and all of this stuff. But do you remember how tight of a grip they had around the speech that was allowed in our society? We were sort of born out of a society with the First Amendment, which had free speech, free association. And these are important concepts. But when a pandemic came around, suddenly none of that was that important anymore. They said, because of people like Fauci, because of people like Psaki, because of people like Biden and others, that all of our opinions, anything that challenged the narrative, was essentially illegal. And many people got suspended. Yours truly, and our channel here included, got the strike button from YouTube, I think on 1 or 2 occasions, for medical misinformation as a result of just engaging in this conversation. Peter Doocey is not going to forget this one, I'm sure. You remember when Psaki was the press secretary and she was in charge of answering questions. Here's one question she answered from Peter Doocey.
About the science evolving, Facebook used to block people from posting that COVID may have originated for a lab. That is something this president now admits is a possibility. So is there any concern that things you're trying to block or have taken down might someday turn out to be?
We don't take anything down. We don't block anything. Facebook and any private sector company makes decisions about what information should be on their platform. Our point.
Can you believe how disgusting that is? At the time when she's making this statement, we didn't know at the time, but now we knew that at the time, FBI, White House officials, State Department officials, Intelligence Committee officials like Adam Schiff, we're all sending emails over to the big social media companies. Now, we've seen them all exposed because very conveniently, Elon Musk dropped a couple $1 billion, 45 of them, and then bought the company. But Jen is sitting here with that smug little response. What are you talking about, Peter? We don't censor anything. Facebook does that. And you go, wait a minute, what? Do you think that's okay now, Jen? And she presumably had an inkling that this was going on and that the government was putting their big fat thumb on Facebook's neck and making them do it. But she sits here and sort of just glosses over that one.
Block or have taken down might someday turn out to be.
We don't take anything down. We don't block anything.
Yes, you do.
Facebook and any private sector company makes decisions about what information should be on the
Because the
platform.
government has their
Our
boot
point
on their neck.
is that there is information that is leading to people not taking the vaccine, and people are dying as a result. And we have a responsibility as a public health matter to raise that issue. The responsibility we all have, the government, media, platforms, public messengers, to give accurate information.
You have to give accurate information, and if you don't give the information that we want you to give, then it's illegal. And we're totally immune from it because we have conveniently outsourced all of our censorship to private companies that are totally unaccountable to the democratic principles of governance. You see how that works? So it literally is fascism. It's sort of this commingling of the government and private enterprise into this super state, superstructure that controls everything. They were just sort of, laughing and yucking it up as they were onboarding us all into this new society. And those of us who were questioning the origin of COVID and other things about it were called murderers, essentially, for murdering grandma. But aside from being called murderers, and we love grandma, which is offensive, aside from being called murderers, this all was just swept under the rug, swept aside like it was just a giant waste of time. A big distraction is what Francis Collins called it. Don't ask about the origin of the lab, the origin of COVID, because it's all meaningless. The only thing that's meaningful is what you hear from us. Just do what we say. Don't worry about the other things. We're in charge. We're smarter than you. And so just stay home, take what we tell you to take, put that in your body. You'll be fine.
Called out.
Right, but I guess it just follows this track with the early days downplaying or trying to discredit the lab leak theory from Wuhan.
Yeah, why'd you do that?
Why spend the time doing that when we're talking about observation, description, experimentation, and explanation?
Yeah, because
now it seems like the lab leak is a real possibility.
Well, Brett, I'm really sorry that the lab leak has become such a distraction for so many people because, frankly, we still don't know. There is no evidence really to say. Most of the scientific community, myself included, think that is a possibility, but far more likely this was a natural way in which a virus left a bat, maybe traveled through some other species and got to humans, and there was no lab leak involved. We won't know unless China decides to open up about this, which they have not done, and shame on them for that.
Dr.
But
Collins,
this has been a huge distraction.
A huge distraction. And it's not that important at all. Because if you did look into it, well, you might find that the U.S. government or maybe these guys were involved in some nefarious activities that they don't want you to look into. And so, just kind of shut up about it. It's a giant distraction. It's really not a big distraction. I mean, if it did in fact come from a lab, don't you want to know about that? It's kind of like if an airplane got blown out of the sky or crashed in the middle of a flight, and everybody just said it's not that big of a deal. All the other planes work. We're gonna get to the bottom of it, right? Anytime there is a man-caused disaster, one of the things that you want to do is figure out how that happened so it doesn't happen again, right? And so if we just had one of the biggest global catastrophes caused by man, it's not a distraction at all. It's kind of like the only issue that matters, right? Is to make sure that doesn't happen again. What caused the lab to fail? What is producing this research? Where's the money coming from? What are the safeguards on it? I mean, most of these people are government regulatory, psychopaths. They love it. They can't get enough of it. So, all right, if this is a problem, how much more money do you need to make sure this crap doesn't happen again? Because I'm sure whatever that cost is, whatever that bill is, it's a lot less than a global pandemic and whatever we just went through. So it's not a distraction at all. Unless, and these are scientists, right? These are scientists. It's like, isn't that kind of like one of the most important questions? Where does this thing come from? And if we don't know where it came from, does that mean that there could theoretically be a whole nother bucket of virus potentials about to burst either through a lab or through a natural reservoir somewhere? It's idiotic. But they know that. The reason why they tried to bury it was intentional deception, intentional malfeasance. They wanted to cover up their tracks, in my opinion. Now, here you can see that a lot of that is very convenient, right? Francis Collins says, gosh, if you really want to get to the bottom of this, you're going to have to go ask China about it. China's going to be the only country that can really help uncover where this thing originated from. But it's a distraction. You shouldn't ask about it anyways. But Fauci, though, What if we did get access to China? A lot of people are saying, well, what if they just open their doors? Are they ever going to be open and transparent?
Yeah, it was very likely. And a host, what the Chinese did, I don't have firsthand knowledge of that, but the people who were reporting it, who investigated, what they did is they cleaned out the markets as soon as it turned out that it was clear that there were clusters coming from the market. Which, in typical fashion, I think, trying to make sure that things don't get pointed to them, they probably got rid of the animals that were the intermediary hosts.
Somebody got rid of something.
Acknowledges now that they don't think it originated in that market.
Well, it may not have originated in the market, but it certainly could have. Animals that
What? Did you hear that stupid statement? What did he just say? It may not have originated, but it could have. And so we should still talk about that instead of talking about the lab leak theory, which is probably where it did come from.
Now that they don't think it originated in that market.
Of course not.
Well, it may not have originated in the market, but it certainly could have. Animals that were not supposed to be brought in from the wild into the wet markets were there. And I think that's the reason why, when this happened, I don't know, but I think why the Chinese just completely cleaned it out. I think that is one of the reasons why we're not able to find out what the original source was. I think they've destroyed some of the evidence.
Yeah, they definitely did destroy some of the evidence.
Yeah, it was very
light. They definitely cleaned it out. There was a big clean out, I'm sure, and there was a lot of evidence that is probably going to be a lot harder to find now, since all of this other stuff has elapsed. Isn't it funny? And they put this guy on TV, and over and over and over again, he's the authority. Oh, no, it must have been some goats or some bats or something that they brought in here from the markets. They cleaned it out. He's telling us the truth. He knows exactly what happened. He's just got the parties wrong. I don't think it was the Chinese. Maybe it was the Chinese, but he knows what was going on here. It wasn't the markets. It was Fauci and co. And so Rand Paul has been on this since day one. He knows what actually went down here, and he has made it his point to bring him to account. Rand Paul in the Senate calls Anthony Fauci to the stand, asks him questions about his narrative on COVID. And this is fun to watch in hindsight.
Senator Paul.
Dr. Fauci, the idea that a government official like yourself would claim unilaterally to represent science, that any criticism of you would be considered a criticism of science itself, is quite dangerous. Central planning, whether it be of the economy or of science, is risky because of the fallibility of the planner. It would not be so catastrophic if the planner were simply one physician in Peoria. Then the mistakes would only affect that physician's patients, the people who chose that physician. But when the planner is a government official like yourself who rules by mandate, the errors are compounded and become much more harmful. A planner who believes he is the science leads to an arrogance that justifies, in his mind, using government resources to smear and to destroy the reputations of other scientists who disagree with him. In an email exchange with Dr. Collins, you conspire, and I quote here directly from the email, to create a quick and devastating published takedown of 3 prominent epidemiologists from Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. Apparently, there's a lot of fringe epidemiologists at Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. And you quote in the email that they, or from Dr. Collins, and you agree that they are fringe. And immediately there's this takedown effort. A published takedown, though, doesn't exactly conjure up the image of a dispassionate scientist. Instead of engaging them on the merits, you and Dr. Collins sought to smear them as fringe and take them down. And not in journals, in lay press.
Anybody who disagrees.
This is not only antithetical to the scientific method, it's the epitome of cheap politics, and it's reprehensible, Dr. Fauci.
It is.
Do you really think it's appropriate to use your $420,000 salary to attack scientists that disagree with you?
Take your mask off, Fauci, so we can hear you.
The email you're referring to was an email of Dr. Collins to me. If you look at the email
that you responded to and hurried up and said, I can do it. We got something in Wired magazine.
No. I think in usual fashion, Senator, you are distorting everything about me.
Did you
First
ever
of all-
object to Dr. Collins' characterization of them as fringe? Did you write back to Dr. Collins and say, no, they're not fringe, they're esteemed scientists, and it would be beneath me
I did
to
not
do that? You
This is from about a year ago, by the way. I think January 2022.
responded to him that you would do it, and you immediately got an article in Wired, and you sent it back to him and said, hey, look, I've got him. I nailed him in Wired of all scientific
That's not what
publications.
went on.
You
There
did.
you go again.
That
You
was your
just do the
response.
same thing every hearing.
That was your response. And
So-
this wasn't the only time. So your desire to take
You're
down
absolutely
people.
incorrect. As usual, Senator, you are
No.
incorrect almost everything you
Well,
said.
no, you deny, but the emails tell the truth of this.
No.
This wasn't the only time. Your desire to take down those who disagree with you didn't stop with Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. You conspired with Peter Daszak, who you communicated with privately.
Who was
and
in the
other
letter?
members
Daszak was in the letter that we just read, the first letter at the start of this segment.
of the scientific community that wrote opinion pieces for Nature. 5 of them signed a paper for Nature, an opinion piece. 17 signed a paper that called it conspiracy theory.
We just read
the
that.
idea that the virus could have originated in the lab.
We just read
Do you
that.
think words like conspiracy theory should be in a scientific paper?
Senator, I never used that word.
No, but
when
all
I
your
was
colleagues
referring
did.
to it. You're distorting
And you-
virtually everything.
Did you?
All his colleagues used that word, and he referenced the article from the White House press briefing room, from the podium, right? We heard it. We followed the whole chain today. They write the article so that he doesn't say the thing, and then he gets to use the article as a tool, just the same way they did with the Hunter Biden laptop. 50 so-called intelligence idiots write a letter, media can use it. In this case, we had 50 so-called epidemiologists, viral idiots, write a letter. That way the White House can use it or the media can use it. Same thing. So then he gets to come out here. I never said conspiracy theory. Of course you didn't. But the article that you referenced everybody to, they did.
Communicate with the 5 scientists who wrote the opinion piece in Nature where they were describing, oh, there's no way this could have come
That was
from the lab.
not me. What I
Did you
did.
talk with any of those scientists
but
privately?
you keep distorting
you?
the truth. It is
Did you
stunning
talk,
how
did
you
you
do
talk
that.
to any of the scientists privately
Yes.
who wrote the opinion? You did.
Well-
What were they telling you privately?
Well, let me explain. You know, you're going back to that original discussion when I brought together a group of people to look at every possibility with an open mind. So not only are you distorting it,
Did that letter that we read sound like it had an open mind about the origin? They said it's overwhelmingly conclusive that this was a natural origin. Overwhelmingly. DOE now agrees with us. He referenced that, said, call those people. They know what they're talking about. They said conspiracies. They didn't have an open mind. They were very conclusory. They all had conflict of interest and they all lied about it. They wrote it even in the document.
you were completely turning it around as
Were
you
most of the
usually
scientists
do.
No,
that
he's
came
not.
to you privately, did they come to you privately and say, no way this came from the lab? Or was their initial impression, Dr. Gary and others that were involved, was their initial impression actually that it looked very suspicious for a virus that came from a lab?
It did because it had the furin cleavage site. And when we were talking about this years ago, there was a great article that was published that really, I think, had 4 factors as to why they thought this was man-made over being natural. And one of the biggest ones that stood out that I still remember is this furin cleavage site. It's this idea that a virus sort of molecule is like a human body in a way. And you remember Frankenstein's monster, right? You sort of cut the head off of one corpse and put it on another body and swap the other one around. That's what the virus sort of looked like, according to this researcher. He said it felt like they just cut the head off one virus and smacked it on the top of another one. And all of that was sort of traceable back to Fauci.
Senator, we are here at a committee to look at a virus now that has killed almost 900,000 people. And the purpose of the committee was to try and get things out how we can help to get the American public. And you keep coming back to personal attacks on me that have absolutely no relevance to reality.
Do you think any
He's asking you direct questions related to your conduct, your specific conduct as the director of the NIAID, including emails and narrative crafting that you were conducting as the head? Like, that's kind of what you do, right? You set the narrative. That's what the CDC director did, is she came out there and gave a bunch of statements. That's what you did, Fauci, from the press briefing room or from the White House podium. Gave us all the statements. So this is not smear campaigns. He's not saying you're a bad parker or a bad tipper or you do weird things on the weekends. It's not about that. It's about your actual conduct. And he is just deflecting because he knows he's totally busted.
Anybody has had more influence over our response to this than you have? Do you think it's a great success? Do you think it's a great success what's happened so far? Do you think the lockdowns were good for our kids? Do you think we slowed down the death rate? More people have died now under President Biden than did under President Trump. You are the one responsible. You are the architect. You are the lead architect for the response from the government. And now 800,000 people have died.
Right.
So you think it's a winning success, what you've advocated for government?
Senator, first of all, if you look at everything that I said, you accuse me of in a monolithic way telling people what they need to do. Everything that I've said has been in support of the CDC guidelines. Wear a mask, get boosted.
And you've advocated to make it coercive
take
done
a look
through
at
force,
everything
you've
that I've
advocated that it
said.
be done by mandate.
Right.
You've advocated that your infallible opinion be dictated by law.
Right. So again, Madam Chair, I would like just a couple of minutes. This happens all the time. You personally attack me, and with absolutely not a shred of evidence of anything you say.
What personal
So I would like to
attacks?
make something clear to the committee.
What are these personal
He's doing
attacks?
this for political reasons. What you need to do is, he said in front of this committee.
You think your takedown of
I
three
was-
prominent
I was
epidemiologists was not political?
You don't want me
That
to
was my
finish because
question.
you know what I'm going to say.
That was the question.
Senator,
Were you
we
political
will-
in taking
at this-
down
at
these
this
three
point-
prominent
Senator
epidemiologists?
Paul, if you would please, I'm going to allow Dr. Fauci to respond. We have a number of senators who would like to ask questions, and I would like him to be able to respond. Please do so.
So the last time we had a committee, or the time before, he was accusing me of being responsible for the death of 4 to 5 million people, which is really irresponsible.
Well, if you funded the research, so-called, that was taking place in the lab that caused the release of the pandemic, if all of that were true, right? I think Paul's point would be accurate, right?
And I said, why is he doing that? There are two reasons why that's really bad. The first is it distracts from what we're all trying to do here today.
Which is what?
Is get our arms around the epidemic and the pandemic that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and one of the ways to do that is by finding out where it started so it doesn't happen again.
Not something imaginary. Number two,
it's not imaginary.
What happens when he gets out and accuses me of things that are completely untrue is that all of a sudden that kindles the crazies out there. And I have life, the threats upon my life.
What? Kindles the crazy?
Harassment of my family.
I don't condone
and
that.
my children.
Nobody
with
condones
obscene
that.
phone calls.
Nobody.
Because people are lying about me. Now, I guess you could say, well, that's the way it goes. I can take the hit. Well, it makes a difference because, as some of you may know, just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, on December 21st, a person was arrested who was on their way from Sacramento to Washington, D.C., at a speed stop in Iowa.
Oh, here we go.
And the police asked him where he was going, and he was going to Washington, D.C. to kill Dr. Fauci.
Oh,
and they found in his car
here we go.
an AR-15 and multiple magazines of ammunition because he thinks that maybe I'm killing people. So I ask myself,
nobody condones that. Nobody condones that. Hopefully that man got some help and he's all right and everything is okay. Fauci's okay. Hopefully he's okay too.
Why would Senator want to do this? So go to Rand Paul website and you see fire Dr. Fauci with a little box that says contribute here. You
I
can do
forgot about
$5,
that.
$10, $20, $100. So you are making a catastrophic epidemic for your political gain. So the
You
only
have
thing that- the
politically
only thing
attacked
that I
your
can-
colleagues and in a politically reprehensible
The
way
only thing that I
attacked their
could think of-
reputations.
Okay,
You won't defend it.
No,
You won't
well,
argue it.
I'm
You'll just
sorry,
simply
that we're
turn around the
going to
attack.
continue this hearing. We have a number of questions.
All right, so that's enough of that. Now, they absolutely hate each other. I forgot about that one. I forgot he brought his donation receipts, which is just great. That's what we want. Hopefully, Rand Paul keeps sticking it to them. Eventually, the Republicans will be back in charge, and eventually we'll have a new executive, presumably a Republican at some point, if they can figure it out. And when that happens, maybe there will be some actual prosecutions. We'll have to see. This was an old clip from Ted Cruz, but here was his take on the prosecutions.
The way it works under our Constitution is that it is the executive branch that brings criminal indictments. It's the executive branch that prosecutes. So Dr. Fauci lied to Congress. He flat out lied to Congress when he said that no, the federal government had not funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute for Virology. Subsequently, the NIH has made clear that that was a lie, and that yet you know what? Merrick Garland and the Biden DOJ, they won't prosecute him. So when these clowns come in front of Congress and perjure themselves, I am sadly confident that Merrick Garland will not prosecute them.
But he won't be in charge forever, and eventually the Republicans presumably will have a Republican in charge, and when they do, we'll see if there are any further investigations that take place. But the White House is responding, and of course we've got John Kirby, who was brought out to talk about this story. They know that they have competing interests. They've got competing assessments on conclusions. Did this come from a lab? Did this come from nature? John Kirby answers some questions about this. And our first question comes in from a woman who says, well, what are we going to do now about this? She sort of jumps in and says that now that we know that that this came from a lab, and Kirby says, hold on a minute, okay, we don't actually even know that. So just pump the brakes, everybody, okay? Just because this showed up in the Wall Street Journal doesn't mean that it's true. And he says there is still no consensus. There's no consensus, and Joe Biden just wants the facts.
The Department of Energy's findings, the lab leak most likely caused the pandemic. How should Americans understand China's response here? Saying that this is politically motivated, it's a lie, there's no science to back it, and swatting down this information.
Well, I can't speak for the Chinese, and I wouldn't endeavor to do that. But just let me back up a little bit. The president made trying to find the origins of COVID a priority, right, when he came into office. And he's got a whole of government effort designed to do that. There is not a consensus right now in the U.S. government about exactly how COVID started. There is just not an intelligence community
a lot of
consensus.
ambiguity.
And I would add that one of the things the president did was he's the one who tasked the national labs, which report up through the Department of Energy, to study this as well. So it wasn't just an effort that was confined to the intelligence community. That work is still ongoing. But the president believes it's really important that we continue that work and that we find out as best we can how it started, so that we can better prevent a future pandemic. I mean, that's the idea here, is to get ahead of it, so that, should there be another one, or should there even be the signs of another one, we can better get ahead of it.
Yeah, and it would be a big problem if we didn't know that. So why was Fauci so unconcerned? Why was Collins calling it a distraction? Why was everybody just sort of calling it conspiracy theories in the media to even question it? It's weird. They're now acknowledging that it is important to get to the bottom of it. I don't know what changed, why it's suddenly now okay to get to the bottom of it. Is there anything else going on in the world right now? Is there other wars that they want to heat up? Is there other escalations taking place?
Though is pretty clearly accusing the Biden administration of smearing them and
it's
trying
going to
to
continue.
say that this is baseless, people shouldn't believe it, and it's a politically motivated attack.
I'm not going to get ahead of where we are in the process, Jackie. The intelligence community and the rest of the government is still looking at this. There's not been a definitive conclusion, so it's difficult for me to say, nor should I feel like I should have to defend press reporting about a possible preliminary indication here. What the president wants is facts. He wants the whole government designed to go get those facts, and that's what we're doing. And we're just not there yet. And when we're there yet, and if we have something that is ready to be briefed to the American people and to Congress, then we're going to do that.
How will the president respond to China, though, if it's determined that they lied about all this, and now we're trying to paint the administration as in such a negative light. How will he respond to Xi and
well, let's not get ahead of where we are in the process right now. There is not a consensus on what caused COVID to start. The president wants to understand that so we can prevent better future pandemics. He's made that a priority, and we don't have an answer to speak to. And so given that we don't have a consensus, it would be foolish for me to get out ahead of speculation on hypothetical situations to come. We just aren't there yet.
All right, so John Kirby, president wants facts. There's no consensus. We're going to hear that line over and over. This guy asked about it, and he says, look, again, it's not confirmed. There's no consensus on it.
Leadership assessment, and was the president himself briefed on that shift?
Again, I'm not going to confirm the press reporting. I'd refer you to DOE, but I'm not going to confirm the press reporting that was out there.
And was the president briefed on this?
The president has stayed informed throughout this entire process of a whole of government effort to try to get at the roots and the origins of COVID.
Was he briefed on the
The
DOE?
president has been kept informed and kept apprised, and he's actively wanted to know what we know every step along the way.
Okay, so not quite sure there. So
I didn't say that. I said the president has kept
I don't
informed.
know your answer whether I was briefed on
I
got it. Is the administration confident in the Israeli government's approach to the recent violence?
All right, so end of that question, but staying very hard with the confirm, don't really know, confirm, don't really know. Now, okay, of course, we've got more to get to. We've got this guy asked about China and their policies, all right? Because if you start accusing the Chinese get, generally speaking, we've seen the exchanges between Blinken and their ambassadors. And when Blinken sat down with the Chinese ambassador and said, hey, we've got a little problem with what you're doing, your sort of, genocidal policies with the Uyghurs. The Chinese were very unhappy about that. And they sort of gave Anthony Blinken the old backhand. They said, what did you say to me? How dare you? And they said, well, you have BLM, burning your streets down, and your vice president is releasing them with bail bond tweets on Twitter. And so Blinken was like, yeah, that's a good point. She did post that tweet. And so they were kind of caught, between a rock and a hard place there. But now we've got questions about this. So wait a minute. Are you saying that the U.S. government, the Department of Energy, is going to be saying that China leaked this virus onto the world from a Chinese lab?
Thanks, John. The president said that he wants cooperation with China, not conflict. But does the U.S. believe that China is pursuing policies, for example, the spy balloon, that make conflict more likely?
One of the things that concerned us about that whole episode, aside from the fact that it was clearly designed to spy from a high altitude over potentially sensitive
they're mad about the
military sites,
balloons too.
is that the lines of communication weren't as open, particularly on the military side, as they need to be. So the president maintains that his goal in the relationship is competition, not conflict. That has not changed, even in the wake of that spy balloon event. But one of the things that really we need to move forward on is opening up lines of communication, particularly on the military-to-military lane. And as you know, those were shut down by the Chinese after Speaker Pelosi went to Taiwan.
Also, do you think that there's, what would happen if China were to send lethal weapons to Ukraine? How would that affect the bilateral relationship?
I'm not going to get into a hypothetical here and speculate. We have not seen the Chinese make a decision to move in that direction. We have been very honest and candid, not only with all of you publicly, but with the Chinese privately, about our concerns over the provision of those kinds of capabilities. And you heard Jake Sullivan talk about this yesterday in terms of the fact that there would have to be ramifications for that.
All right, so we have interesting kind of non-statements there that, if the Chinese are mad that we shot their spy balloon out of the sky, they're going to be very upset if you accuse them, their entire country, of leaking the virus out onto the world. And so we've got some additional great questions. This woman asks, are we ever going to see a report? Will there ever be a consensus? I mean, good Lord, it's been years already. How much longer do you need? Okay, the Chinese have rebuilt an entire city over Wuhan by now. So is there anything more that you're going to get before you can get to a consensus? And then the last question, of course, is about whether Biden is still doing this research. Is he still in favor of gain-of-function research? John Kirby answers that question? We don't know. Like, are we going to go through this whole thing over again? We're going to find out more about that right after we talk about our friends at fieldofgreens.com, because we would all like to lose those leftover pandemic pounds, speaking of the pandemic. But how sick are you of all those weight loss ads and fad pills and diets and all that stuff? We've all been there. We all know they don't work. But you know what does? Eating healthy servings of fruits and vegetables every day. You do that and you imagine the weight just starts falling off. But vegetables, look, not a fan. And who's got time to prepare all this stuff every day? Instead, let's talk about Field of Greens. Field of Greens is a science-backed formula, very specific fruits and vegetables you're not going to find in any other product. Proper nutrition reboots your metabolism so you burn calories faster and lose weight a healthier way. And Field of Greens is the only brand backed by a better health promise. Yes, you are going to look healthier, feel healthier, but the greater proof is going to come the next time you visit your doctor and your doctor says, wow, you've lost weight. Whatever you're doing, you look great. Keep it up. So let's get you started. Go on over to fieldofgreens.com. Don't forget to use code Robert to save 15% off your first purchase at fieldofgreens.com. Very good, very delicious, tastes good going down, has all the amazing vegetables and fruits you need, and the vegetables want you to eat them. Trust me, okay? They like it. They're put on this planet for you to consume. So eat them up and feel happy and bursting with green energy like I do. Go to fieldofgreens.com and don't forget to use code Robert. All right. And so a big question for the White House has been, well, you have all these reports, you have all these different agencies who agree that it was a lab leak. Some say it was natural. Are we ever going to see these reports there, John?
On the Energy Department's assessment, should the evidence that the department is basing this assessment on be shared with the American people?
As I said, if we have something that we believe can be reported to the Congress.
There's a lot that can be reported.
That we're confident
John.
in. We will absolutely do that.
You said that right now there is not a consensus. Will there ever be a definitive answer from the Biden administration on the origins of COVID-19? And how much of that is dependent on cooperation from China?
We really do want to know what happened here.
So do we.
Because the president wants to make sure that we're postured to prevent any future pandemics, or if not prevent them, to be able to get farther along ahead of them. So we're working very hard to understand this as best we can.
Yeah.
Again, there's just no consensus across the government. The work continues, and I'm not going to get ahead of conclusions that haven't been.
Okay, how much work is completed? Like what percentage? You know, like when you're installing a program, you're like at 65%, and you're like, man, this is taking forever. Gosh, this Adobe software is ridiculous. 87%, and 99%. Where are we at there, John? What percentage are we? When are we going to be 100% done with our COVID origin investigation? Are we ever going to get like a 9/11 report or a final document that gives us the details on this? Or is strategic ambiguity kind of the better solution for you guys?
Arrived at yet.
Just one last quick follow-up. What agency is taking the lead on this?
This is a whole of government effort, and clearly
nobody.
here at the National Security Council, we're running the interagency process on this, but it's a whole of government effort.
Answer, nobody. So are we ever going to get a final conclusion report? No, because nobody's actually in charge of it, right? That's what happens. When it's a whole of government response, you get a bunch of different reports. And our government is so inept that we get literally different conclusions from different agencies. Isn't it amazing? 2 of them say, yeah, probably lab. 5 of them say, nah, natural. 2 of them, we don't know. I don't know. We're kind of confused on this. So watch the other 2 go out towards lab leak, and it'll be a 4 to 5 scenario. What are we going to do? Gosh, what a conundrum. Man, if only we had some competence. Now, another question, of course, is there ever going to be a consensus? Like, how long is this going to go on? Are you just going to keep coming out here month after month, year after year, time and time after, time, and telling us the same thing? John, come on already.
Thanks, Karine. To follow on the lab leak theory, back in October 2021, it was also the case that there was no consensus from the intelligence community.
We remember that, yeah.
Where COVID came from. Without revealing sensitive information, has the IC gathered new information, new intelligence since then that might have led DOE to draw a different conclusion?
We, again, without confirming the press reporting on the Department of Energy's work here, and the context for them is that they run the national labs, and the president wanted the national labs involved there. Again, a whole of government effort. The work is still ongoing. There hasn't been a final conclusion
When can we expect
arrived
one?
at here.
When are we
and
getting it?
Not everyone in the intelligence community or across the government necessarily has come to a consensus view here on how it started. But I want to go back to what I said before, and that's that the president believes it's important to know so that we can better prevent future pandemics. And obviously, regardless of what the source is, it's important for people to know that scientific research can still occur, needs to occur, in a safe and secure manner.
You hear that? It still needs to occur in a safe and scientific manner, which means it's sort of going to continue on whatever we were doing previously.
The president was asked.
So we've got that. Last question for Kirby comes out from this gentleman in the back. He says, all right, and this is a complicated question for John. He needs it repeated a couple of times. Hey, John, is it possible that the president is going to change his perspective on gain-of-function research? Because if this did come from a lab, there's all this commingling between U.S. interest and Chinese interest through EcoHealth Alliance, through the NIAID. It feels like these things just may be a little bit too coupled, and it might have caused this current environment and a global catastrophe. Is the president reconsidering any of that type of research or science?
Thank you, Karine. Two quick questions, sir. First, has President Biden asked, or does he plan to ask, President Xi to cooperate with investigations into the origins of the virus? Or at this point, does the administration believe that cooperation will not come from Beijing?
We have consistently made it clear that we want China's full cooperation in a full, transparent way with the investigations into COVID, including when he met with President Xi in Bali just a couple of months ago.
And then, without weighing in one way or the other on origin of the virus, you've made clear that there's no consensus. Does the president believe, though, that the reward outweighs the risk when it comes to gain-of-function research?
Does the reward outweigh the risk when it comes to gain of it?
Yeah,
I got a history degree. You're going to have to say that again?
Does the president believe that this type of...
He's a little folksy, isn't he? He says, I have a history degree. You're going to have to slow that down for me there, young journalist. And look at all these people in the press. They all love him. They're all yucking it up. Oh, that's so funny.
Reward outweigh the risk when it comes to gain of it.
That type of research is
I got a history degree. You're going to have to say that again?
Does the president believe that this type of gain-of-function research is proven?
He believes that it's important to help prevent future pandemics, which means
yes,
he understands
that
there has to be.
In order to prevent future pandemics, we have to research in a way that probably caused this pandemic. Brilliant.
Legitimate scientific research into the sources or potential sources of pandemics.
Yeah.
So that we understand.
Yeah, like the Wuhan lab of virology. Yeah.
It so that we can prevent them and we can prevent them from happening.
Hey, one way to prevent them is just to not do the thing that caused them in the first place, which in this case, according to the Department of Energy, was a lab.
But he also believes, and this is why he wants the whole of government effort here to understand it, that research has to be done, it must be done in a safe and secure manner and as transparent as possible to the rest of the world so people know what's going on. So I think that's a fancy way of saying yes.
Yes, it is a fancy way of saying yes. More gain-of-function research. Biden's thrilled with that. He said, hey, this one got me elected. You know, I love pandemics. It's a great thing. Yeah, well, let's do another one. Maybe in 2024. It'd be great. So we've got John Kirby, of course, explaining all of this to the White House. We are not done yet. Karine Jean-Pierre also had some to say on the COVID origin story. Question from the media. Hey, Karine, can you tell us how you guys are investigating this? I mean, we all want a report. You say you've got reports. You've got all these different agencies who are investigating it. Are we ever going to see anything? She said, well, Kirby said, well, maybe, maybe not, as soon as we find something useful. So they go back over to the White House. Karine, you're in charge here in this room. You work for the president. What is he doing to lead the efforts to actually investigate the origin story and provide us with a report.
DOE assessment to get a swing at Kirby. Without asking specifically about that, just more the tempo and rhythm of things, I think the surprise was that it just kind of popped in the last 48 hours. This has been an all-of-government effort. It's been across agencies. Can you give us a sense of how this is actually working in terms of what the timelines are, what kind of effort is going in on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis as to why this would happen now, why there would be an update now?
So I can't speak to, again, and Kirby the Admiral was trying to be very clear here. He didn't want to confirm the story or speak to the story. I mean, what I can
They're
say,
not asking you to
and
do
I
that.
would just lean into what the National Security Advisor said yesterday on many of your networks. He did a bit of a round robin yesterday on the Sunday shows.
Jake Sullivan from Oxford.
Look, this is something that the president takes very seriously. He directed repeatedly his intelligence community to put efforts and resources behind getting to the bottom of the origins of COVID-19.
Probably need a few more years, huh?
He was he doubled down on that and like I said, redirected his intelligence community, and that's what you're seeing. But again, there's not a consensus here. We're still going through the process, and as we are getting briefed and updated, the president will certainly share that with Congress and the American people. But the president believes that it is important that we get to the bottom of this, especially as we need to prepare for who knows what the future may hold. Don't want to get into hypotheticals from here.
No, we don't.
But we need to be prepared for the potentially another pandemic.
Yeah,
And so-
especially one that might be caused by human beings. Not ideal. All right, so if they're not going to tell us about the process for investigating, what's going into it, what agency is leading it, are we going to come to a final conclusion? They're not going to give us any of those details. Well, what about the final report? Obviously, that's classified. We're not going to get that either. Okay, well, how about, for crying out loud, at least an unclassified report, something? Can you give us some words on a page? Can we see some black letters on a white page talking about documents, just to be clear?
Following up on that, are there any plans for the administration to release an unclassified version of the Energy Department's COVID origin report? And if not, why is the administration choosing to keep that assessment classified?
So again, I'm going to just repeat my National Security Council colleague who said that he don't want to get ahead don't want to confirm a story, so I'm certainly not going to answer that from here. What I can tell you and reiterate from here, as he has said, as the National Security Advisor has said many times on the airwaves yesterday, which is that the president wants to get to the bottom of this because he thinks it's incredibly important to figure out, to get a sense where COVID-19 originated from.
So does the administration first need to find a consensus before releasing some of these assessments, or why not put out everything that you found?
Well, I think it's basically what we've been saying. There has been no consensus, so I think they're working through that. The intelligence community is working through.
What's your standard for what a
through getting to the
consensus looks
bottom
like?
of this, as the president has directed and as the president wants to see. Certainly not going to get ahead of their process.
Yeah, so if it's like a 6-3, is that a vote? Like, is it a consensus vote? Do we vote on this? Do the different agencies tally them up? Or how does it work? But we don't know. The one thing we do know is that we're not going to be getting any reports, at least anytime soon. Another interesting question I thought came on this one. Why specifically is the Department of Energy looking at this, right? Kind of an interesting agency we don't hear a lot about. Usually we talk about the FBI, the DOJ. Here, oftentimes when it comes to foreign policy, Secretary of State, DOD, Admiral Kirby, and many others. But what about the Department of Energy? Why are they involved in this? Question from the media.
On the lab, with the Department of Energy having expertise on an oversight of laboratories, does that in and of itself suggest there is something particularly new in this intelligence that should give people a sense of greater credibility or insight because of the kind of expertise DOE has in this area?
The national labs. No, I understand the question because of the national labs, which is why they were asked to look into it. I'm not at liberty to confirm the reporting, so I'm not going to do that from here. What I can tell you is, again, there's been no consensus on this, on where COVID originated. So I'll just leave there and not try to get ahead of the current process at this time.
All right, not much on that question. DOE is interesting. They've got all the labs. But of course, a very good question came from this woman in the media. Says, Karine, we know you guys came out and you said a bunch of stuff about the lab leak theory, and now it turns out that maybe one of your own agencies says that there might be some truth to it. Do you regret your erroneous conclusions?
One more on the lab leak news from the Department of Energy. With all of this information coming out, and obviously the president had ordered a multi-agency effort that included the Department of Energy to try to get at the origins question. But looking, with hindsight 2020, and now these conclusions coming out from parts of this administration, was it prudent to have at the time some administration officials voicing support for one origins theory over another, like Dr. Fauci did in a couple instances? He said, my belief is that it's most likely natural transmission. Dr. Collins at one point sent an email to Dr. Fauci that was discussing the lab leak theory as a conspiracy theory. So given where we're at now, looking backward and with respect to how we talk about these things, if it ever happens in the future, is it prudent to have members within the administration voicing support for one theory over another if there isn't a consensus of that?
So I do want to speak to Dr. Fauci because the political attacks on someone like Dr. Fauci, who and public officials more broadly, but Dr. Fauci, who has spent his career saving lives, Wait,
what? The allegation, Karine, is that the virus that killed millions of people, the allegation is that it came through Fauci's agency. He directed it to be done over there. So the idea that he's being attacked for causing the whole thing, right, is kind of the lead source of this, and being the person who got very wealthy, very well-known, basically a career-defining climactic event for the guy. If he was sort of responsible for the environment that led to the cause of it, he deserves to be castigated peacefully, civilly, legally, in every forum, does he not?
Members within the administration voicing support for one theory over another if there isn't a consensus of that.
So I do want to speak to Dr. Fauci because the political attacks on someone like Dr. Fauci, who and public officials more broadly, but Dr. Fauci, who has spent his career saving lives, whether it was the AIDS epidemic or as we have just coming out of this COVID, this once-in-a-generation pandemic, these attacks have been counterproductive. They have not been helpful. This is someone, again, who has spent his almost entire career fighting for the well-being, the health of the American people. And so I just want to call out the political attacks. I think, again, it's not been helpful. Dr. Fauci himself has said
it has been helpful. He's no longer in charge of things. Good riddance to him.
Agrees with the president that we needed to get to the bottom of this, to get to the bottom of where COVID originated. That's what the president did from certainly the first few months of his administration. And we have been grateful. Again, we have been grateful to Dr. Fauci's wisdom. We've been grateful to Dr. Fauci's advice during the COVID response. And we have been very, very clear here. We need to know more. We need to get to the bottom of how COVID-19 originated. And so that is why, again.
Well, why didn't your hero Fauci, that she loves so much, she gave him this hagiography on his last day. Oh, we're gonna miss you. You were here. You saved our lives, and then showed him the door. But she could have asked him, right? She could have had direct conversations with him. I wonder if those happened.
That is why the president directed his IC and his intelligence community to get to the bottom of this. And so I'll leave it there.
More broadly than Dr. Fauci, though, I guess what I'm getting at is there was not so long ago a point where anyone asking the question of whether a lab leak was a credible theory that should be looked into.
Racist,
a lot of those people were
murderer,
derided as fringe, conspiracy theorists. So are there lessons learned, looking back about how we discuss theories when we don't have all of the answers.
So here's what I
everything we
can
did was
tell you
right.
is the president's commitment to getting to the bottom of this.
Ah.
Right? That is what's the most important, so that
That's
we can,
not what she's
we
asking,
can share
Karine.
this with Congress, we can share this with the American people. That is why he asked the IC to do its work. And right now there is
like she doesn't
no
even listen to
consensus.
the
There is no
questions.
consensus. You heard this from Jake Sullivan yesterday. You heard this from my colleague just moments ago. And we're going to do everything that we can. The president is asking his team to do everything that they can to figure out where it originated, because of what could potentially happen next, because of the potential of having another pandemic. And I think that's what's most important. That's what American people should have confidence in, is that you have a president that wants to get to the bottom of this. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, he wants to get to the bottom of it, and he really doesn't want to know really kind of how it came about. We've got this ambiguity taking place across all of the different federal agencies. Don't really know whether we're going to get a report or not, or whether there's going to be any conclusion that is provided to us in any way, shape, or form. Fauci is out of government now, so he's sort of trying to immunize himself, get out of the blast zone, and we'll see if the Republicans are able to turn anything up or what happens if this continues to escalate. But of course, we will continue to cover it. Thank you for liking this video wherever it is you're watching. We really appreciate you liking the video. Thank you for sharing the video. And if so you can't encourage somebody to come and join us on a live stream. I know it's a long thing, but if you want to invite them to watch a short, that would also be very helpful. I really appreciate you sharing those shorts so that more people can connect with the work that we do here. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going to leave it there. Now it is time to hear from you and to see what you have to say about this. I saw some very generous super chats come in from our friends over on YouTube and our friends over on Rumble. Shout out to Penny Whitbrot in the house. Shared this article, and actually I wanted to pull this one up, I think, first from our friends on Rumble. Penny Whitbrot is here and says, yeah, Stanley Perlman on that list, University of Iowa, got caught doing research without any authorization on a select agent program called MERS. Says the link is coming. And then she shared this link over from USA Today. And so here was this guy. Okay, so this was interesting. I was sort of flipping through this. And first of all, thank you very much, Penny Whitbrot, over from Rumble. Greatly appreciative of your rants over there and your great questions and your story. Shared this one. This one was back in 2014. Okay, very interesting. 2014 article. And you're saying that this person here, Stanley Perlman, is on this letter. Let's take a look. There he is. Look at that. Stanley Perlman right there. You're not kidding about that. So look at this. Okay. Stanley Perlman writes this letter. Says it's definitely a conspiracy theory that this came out of a lab. Okay. We don't do that type of stuff in labs. All right. Overwhelmingly conclude it originated in wildlife. This comes over from Stanley Perlman. Now, thank you to our great friend Penny over from Rumble. We have another source of another story, which reveals the following from this guy. It says that research was improperly conducted at an Iowa college. MERS research. University of Iowa scientist was sanctioned. This is a 2014 article. Sanctioned for launching work on the deadly MERS virus without school approval and outside of the proper laboratory setting. Here's the dude, Stanley Perlman. The school is accused of being improperly withholding forms that could help public assess whether the deadly agent was stolen, lost, or released. Bioscience researcher said that is a public record. Perlman obtained a clone of the MERS virus, better known as MERS, and had been conducting experiments since September 2013. Yeah. A so-called bio level 3 lab requires more personal protective equipment. Perlman's team had inserted green and red fluorescent proteins into clones at a level 2 lab. All right. So there's just a bunch of mad scientists everywhere, just, playing around with viruses in different labs. This guy is finicking around with MERS, inserting cloned, in fluorescence or things into it. In 2014, gets into trouble, gets sanctioned from it, doesn't learn his lesson, and then shifts everything back over to this new letter, says, no, China's not doing it either. Don't worry about it. Amazing. All right. So that was from our friend Penny. Thank you very much for that, Penny. Great comment over on Rumble. And also shared a couple one. Here's another one. Wow, another great one from Penny. Thank you, Penny. Penny sharing another one. Harvard's Charles Liebner in front of a nanotech lab. Wow, this is an interesting one. All right, this one's a little bit more hefty. So I'll read that one later. Thank you for that one, Penny. Interesting. Okay, so that's over on Rumble. Very grateful to our Rumble friends. Thank you guys for following us and watching over there. I'm really appreciative of that. And Penny sent several more. Nurse Penny here to help. Thank you, Penny. Says it gets better and better. I've been deep diving this on my podcast for years. Okay, well, Penny, what's the name of the podcast so we can plug the podcast? Penny Whitbrot. Let's see if Penny has a Rumble account. Yes, she does. Okay. Okay, my friends. So here's what you should be doing right now. As you can see, Penny Wilbrot has a very nice Rumble channel, and I'd encourage you to go over there and give her a follow. Lots to catch up on. Friday night live streams. And she's got some good facts. Yeah, it gets better and better. I've been deep diving this on my podcast. Thank you, Penny, for sharing that. Good old Stan is also on the advisory committee. Stanley Perlman is on the, wow, okay, this is good stuff, man. This is good stuff over from Nurse Penny. She says, look at the pic, Robert, read the sign. All right, thank you, Penny. It's Nurse Penny. Yeah, I found it. All right, so that's Nurse Penny. Go follow her on, actually, it's this one right here. This is the account, Nurse Penny. So that's the one to follow. Yeah, Rumble's a little bit weird. So like Rumble will have, like you can have a personal and then the actual account. So follow this one. That's the one to follow. Nurse Penny, not the personal one that I shared first. Thank you, Nurse Penny. Thanks for being over there. And it's cool. It's cool. I followed you. I'm going to watch your stuff. I don't follow a ton of people on Rumble. So that's pretty cool. Okay. Yeah. Let me watch your stuff. I'll watch your stuff and then we'll be in touch. Okay, so thank you guys over on Rumble. We also want to shout out our Twitter friends over on Twitter and see what else is going on in the chat. Say hello to our free speech platforms. We, of course, are going over to Locals for our after party. Locals and Telegram, we're going to hang out for a bit. So if you're not already a member on Locals or if you're not already a member on YouTube, now's a great time to join us because we're going to go over there and hang out on Telegram and on Locals. And Paul's wondering, because Paul's been hanging out on Telegram. Our Telegram is popping, man. It's hot right now. Says, what's happening on over Locals? Say hi for me. Paul's been on Telegram. Bonnie described our Telegram as a man cave, and I think it's a pretty apropos description. James Pepper says, found an extra pair of boots at the work site. I decided to give my boss a heart attack. Oh, there it is. That's a good one. I like it. From James Pepper. Says, Danny McWilliams is in the house. Says, blame everything on E.T. Roberto is watching on Roku. Shout out to our friend, Roberto. Penny says, here's another tidbit. Runbeck got over $1 million in PPP funding. Runbeck was the election company, wasn't it? Those are from our friends on Rumble. Yeah, it was an election company. Interesting. Okay, and so that is it for our Twitter friends, my friends. We're also going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com right now for our after party. We got C. Reeds over there, Facts Matter, cool guys in the house, Zach Nichols. I think we have Jake Sullivan is over there. I think he might be in the house today. We'll have to see. But we are going over there. That, my friends, is it for us on the day. And so if you would like to join us, head on over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com, or you can join on YouTube if you're a member. Either way, you get access to our private Telegram group where the chat goes on and on, my friends. Even though the show must come to an end, the chat goes on and on, my friend. And so you can join us if you're a member on the chat. Also want to remind you, if you haven't already, now's a great time to get your Field of Greens. Ultra elevate your nutrition with daily servings of fruits and vegetables. It tastes good going down. It makes the vegetables happy. It's going to make you feel bursting with green energy and vibrant. You're going to love it. Don't forget to use code Robert when you check out fieldofgreens.com. They've got this real organic superfood. You just drink it every day. And they also have other stuff, right? People are buying collagen. People are buying stuff to help you sleep, and other stuff. It's a whole smorgasbord of good stuff. So check them out, fieldofgreens.com, and also by checking out with code Robert. Now, did I forget the super chats? I think I did forget the YouTube super chats. My goodness, I almost skipped over those because we jumped over to Rumble and I almost forgot about it. All right, we had a couple come in today. One from Chris Wolney said here, how is Fauci not held in contempt of Congress by not answering Rand Paul's questions? He is almost dead to rights for perjury. He's a Teflon man. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to get somebody to prosecute him. You'd have to get a referral over from somebody. And the executive branch is not going to prosecute something like that. I mean, think about like what it's taken for Congress to prosecute somebody. And in most cases, it's like, I mean, think about like what happened with Steve Bannon. Like that's really the last one that we've seen. Had to go through a whole process, get an official committee, get a subpoena, reject the subpoena, go through court, have a full trial and lose. Like that's it. At some point, I think that could happen with Fauci, but he'd probably just show up, and just do that stupid thing that he does. And nobody would answer any questions. Yeah. All right. Chris Wolney's in the house. Thank you, Chris. And hey, real quick, I want to thank Zulu. Zulu is in the house, and Zulu bought 5 new members, memberships for 5 new members. And I'm very grateful to our friend Zulu for doing that. So welcome everybody. We do member only morning streams. It's usually in the mornings for most people. Sometimes it's afternoon for some people, but we hit the headlines. We like to look at the schedule on the day and see what we're getting prepared for show prep. So if you want to join, get some member only content and connect with the community, you got that now. Thank you to Zulu. Zulu bought 5 new memberships. And so we'll see 5 more people, hopefully tomorrow in the morning. Fred is here. He says, Rob, Johnny is mad. He said, tell Rob the scale is not even. The left is too high. Fix it or I'll fix it myself. And he doesn't want that. And I don't want that. So Fred Pedamonte has this rascally dog called Johnny. And Johnny is right. That scale is a little bit off. Johnny's right. You see that scale right here? There's actually something on that scale, Johnny. There's a coin on there. Don't even know what it is. But I'll have to figure out what it is one day and share it with you. I think it might be a police coin or something. I don't know what it is. But we'll have to look into it. We'll get it fixed, Johnny. Please don't send the FBI or Ghislaine Maxwell or Epstein to my house. All right, that is from Fred Pedamonte and that rascally dog, Johnny. And of course, my friends, that is it for us. Thank you to our friends on YouTube for those super chats. We also want to shout out my former law firm, although I am no longer at the R&R Law Group. They are still doing amazing work there at the firm. And you can find them at rrlawaz.com. 480-787-0394. If you know anybody in the state of Arizona charged with a crime, they are the law firm to help. rrlawaz.com. Also want to thank the mods and the meme smiths who help assemble the, keep the show nice and productive. Our friends Vientikis Prime, who I think is on game night. It's Monday. Good luck, V. K Bean in the house. Shout out to K Bean, our friend Just Cause, playing hooky. We've got Ronnie Cole and our friend Zulu, who was very gifty and generous today. Thank you, Zulu, for that. Also, Geomancy Games. You can find him on YouTube. Shout out to our friend Sleepy Dog Lee, who is a great follow on Twitter. Our meme smith, Geegum Geegum. We're very grateful for all of you and all of your help in making the show possible. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com and YouTube. If you're a member, if you're a member on YouTube, check out the community tab so you can, or the posts tab, so you can get access to the Telegram link so that you can continue on with us on the show. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We will leave it right there. I hope you have a beautiful evening, and I see you right back here tomorrow so that together, with your help, we can shine that big big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Telegram, locals, my friends, hang tight. Be with you in a minute. Everybody else, have a beautiful weekend. Weekend's over. It's only Monday. We'll be right back here on Tuesday. Hope to see you there. Until then, my friends, bye-bye.